Thank you. Mes amis collègues, Siju, Georges, merci pour votre invitation. Cette fantastique ville, ce fantastique congrès pour partie de famille RAMSES. So thank you guys for inviting me. Siju, Georges, thank you for inviting me to this wonderful city, your conference, and for inviting me to your RAMSES family. And so I really appreciate that, so thank you, Siju. Siju's been a mentor of mine since I was a resident when I did my fellowship at Montsouris in Paris. I used to email him all the time, you know, if I'd never seen laparoscopic anything, so I'd email him and what should I do? And he'd tell me, sit in the lap trainer and suture. That's what you need to do. It served me well, so thank you. And we've done a lot of cool things together and with Jamin, which we'll show here. And so today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the role of medical media and by translation and close follow-up, social media, and why that's important for us as physicians to be a party to that, and how it plays a role in where healthcare is going in the future. And I'll talk a little bit about how I got involved. It was a little bit by accident. So this gentleman here is Chef Robert Tolko, and he is a TV chef. I didn't know this. He came to see me as a second opinion for his prostate cancer. His wife was a gynecologist who I worked with in the hospital, and he showed up, had Gleason 9 prostate cancer. He had an elevated PSA. We biopsied it. We talked about all the different options. He wanted to do robotic surgery. God bless him. He had, it seemed like every place he could have a hernia, they had put a giant laparoscopic mesh on. So it was a really actually difficult prostatectomy. He did great, but before that, he came to me, he's like, hey, can you come to TV and tell everyone that I have prostate cancer with me? I'm like, what do you do? I didn't know what he meant. So we went, and so he was like, just show up at the station at 3:30 in the morning. We're gonna cook something together. And then I was like, what? So I showed up at 3:30 in the morning and we cooked some eggs or something. And then we talked a little bit of prostate cancer. Then the football team's band was there and we banged on pots while they played drums. Ridiculous. And so from that came a follow-up interview after his surgery. We talked about that, and then apparently I did something right because other stations and his station came up, so I started talking about different things, including the Drive for Men Health. So we began promoting those things, and so it became an opportunity where when things came up, I got an opportunity to go and talk about men's health issues, other issues that were health driven, especially prostate cancer issues when they would come up. And so different stations, different things came up. Bruce Jenner, when that came up, I spoke a lot about that for reasons I don't know. But one thing that I had to learn was you have to be very careful about who's writing the captions for the internet portions of your segments. I got asked by the news to talk about a local rapist who was getting chemical castration as his punishment and what that meant. So a friend of mine sent me a text. He's like, what happened? Are you okay? I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, I was Googling Channel 4 thing and it says this. And so I called the reporter. I'm like, what, can you change this? Because people are calling me that I'm going to prison for life. So if you are going to get on here, be very careful because, and my girlfriend Addie, who you guys met, actually found this as well and was like, do I need to be concerned? This is years old. So I'm not a rapist, but be careful. If you are going to do this, you have to take a little bit of control over your content. So that translated a few years later to the radio station came up and asked me, would you be interested on doing a radio show, which I do every Saturday on health topics. And I actually started doing it with that chef. His TV program was about a 5-minute segment. He did 2-3 times a week. The radio show is about an hour segment. So the thing I like about the radio, it allows for a more intimate journey into the topic. And Jamin and Siju have been on the show with me. On TV, it's very quick. You kind of jump into things. This allows you to kind of delve into it more. And kind of started out with friends. That's my mom. My mom's kind of like a world-renowned breast pathologist. She pioneered or was one of the first people to kind of push the envelope for fine needle aspiration biopsy for the breast. And so I have her on a lot. It's a friend of mine, Andrew Erickson. He's a very prominent guy in terms of healthcare setting up practices and things like that. So for healthcare policy, he would be on early on. And obviously Jamin and CJ would come on and we talk about different things and have a lot of fun. We got very fortunate where our audience began to grow. And the reason I put this way, social media plays a big role in this, and I'll kind of revisit this and tell you how this all plays together. So Zev Wiseman, very prominent urologic oncologist who was a mentor of mine from being a med student and a resident, he came on the show. That was a big day for me. Dave Aldala, a very prominent prostatectomist. Ray Levely, a prominent minimally invasive kidney surgeon. Andrew Vickers, a wonderful epidemiologist for how we deal with prostate cancer from Memorial Sloan Kettering. All these guys have been guests. HIFU just got FDA approved, focal therapy for the prostate cancer. We started our fusion biopsy program in Jacksonville. We're one of the first small groups in the country to do that. We started our program with the guidance of Peter Pinto at NIH and Mark Emberton. I met Mark Emberton when I was doing my fellowship at Montsouris. Through the radio, through that relationship, I asked him, would you want to come on the radio show? We've had Mark Emberton calling from London, Ash Ahmed. Dr. Stephen Cianti is one of the world's most prominent HIFU guys. He's been on a lot. And so this week, when HIFU got FDA approved, he was on the show. The week before, we had Ash Ahmed talk about focal therapy. In September we had. So you prime this stuff and you keep up to date with what's going on. And these relationships not only translate well for your professional career, but they also allow us to keep up to date. And when you transcribe our show, that's about 25 to 30 pages of content which you can use on your Facebook pages, on your websites. And again, the reason I bring this stuff up in pieces is because it all comes together in the end. Again, all of this stuff started by accident. So as the show grew, people of prominence and who I find to be mentors as I grew up as a urologist found out about the show. Mark Soloway, one of the most world-renowned urologic oncologists, I met him at a conference and he knew about the radio show. And he's been on the show 5-6 times. Every time he's on the show, he calls to be on the show for other topics. And we formed a relationship and we're doing a prostate cancer symposium in Jacksonville coming up. He is my keynote speaker. So again, these relationships that you form. Indy Gill, he has been on the show 2-3 times now, and he's probably going to be on the show a few more other times to talk about the controversy of open versus robotic cystectomy. We talked at the World College of Endourology. He wants to come on the show and do that. We've used that relationship to talk about things we're going to do with Drive for Men's Health potentially. Vic Nitti, female urology. I don't do much female urology, but he's been on the show a few times talking about the mesh controversy. So you can be up to date, and then these allow us to form relationships where if I didn't do this, I probably wouldn't, because our paths wouldn't necessarily have crossed as often. The other thing that this does, it forces you to be educated and learn about things that you otherwise wouldn't. I do a lot of stuff now with healthcare reform, other aspects of things. So Dr. David Samadi is a urologist, he's a prostatectomist. He also happens to be Iranian, I'm an Iranian American. He's a very prominent medical media face in the United States. So when we're doing this stuff at the AUA, we met, and he was thinking about moving into radio himself. So somehow through Facebook and different things, he knew that I did a radio show. So he reached out to me, and I've been on a guest on his show a few times. The young lady at top, Michelle Cambolis, is an author and an expert in female stress. So she's written and is a very prominent person on media. She reached out for me. She lives in Vancouver and found us out through social media and different aspects, and checked out a radio show and found out that we're doing some interesting thing. She's been on the show a number of times talking about her issues, and we'll talk a little bit later. In the United States, there have been a lot of mass murders from children and adolescents who've gone through issues. She's a prominent guest that comes up a lot from that standpoint. So again, it allows you to enter different realms of things. And again, the topics that we cover are a wide breadth of things. So it allows you to gain exposure, and secondary, you get a little bit of a secondary expertise in your community that translates well for your professional life as a urologist or as a surgeon or whatever it is that you're doing professionally. So you can see here that by doing this, it allows you exposure to many different things, and it allows you to open the doors that otherwise you may not do. I got to meet Bob Woodward. He's one of the journalists that opened up the Watergate scandal. through my experiences and things that I was able to do from the radio show that opened the door to that. And also Siju and Jamin. Now, this is the key thing that we'll talk a little bit about, and I'll revisit this. Why get involved? So you can just do this and say it's easy to kind of get involved and you'll get attention and things like that. Again, I stumbled onto this completely by accident, but what I take away from it is that it's an opportunity to educate our community and our colleagues. It allows us to engage our community and our colleagues in what we are doing in their health. And from what I gather in RAMSES, that's one thing that everyone here is more involved in and more passionate about than some of the other groups that you see, or else you guys wouldn't be here. You know, you guys are fighting this battle all the time in terms of pushing the envelope of technology and pushing the envelope of science. This is a medium that allows you to engage and set the conversations yourself. And it also inspires the people around you to do better and get the correct information. This picture is important. So these are two guys, they're patients of mine. The gentleman in the middle is no longer with us. He's a gentleman who kind of got diagnosed with an early prostate cancer, avoided getting his PSA screened for a long time, and just kind of didn't want to do anything for it. He read somewhere that I did HIFU, thought this would be a good thing to do, found me out. When he saw me, his PSA was 569. He already had metastatic disease. We kind of talked him into getting everything controlled. We started on hormones. He also had a pretty aggressive local superficial bladder cancer that we controlled. We got him controlled. He went back to some holistic therapies. We got him back in, got him under control. Through this process and some awareness campaigns we did for prostate cancer, he met this other guy. This other gentleman had prostate cancer confined to his prostate. He had a prostatectomy. He's doing fine. They somehow formed a great friendship. The way I found this out, I was doing a resection of a bladder tumor on the gentleman in the middle, and his friend was the one who brought him. I was like, how do you guys know each other? And they met through an event, and they maintained their friendship. They came on my radio show to tell their stories together about what happened. And this is a perfect way to both, to all three, educate our community, engage them in their story, and in this way inspire people to be healthier. And it's interesting, when Tom, the gentleman in the middle, passed away, Peter came on the show and we did a show in his honor and inspired people to go get screened and get checked out, because this is a completely preventable death. So then this third part came out. I do a weekly TV show here where I'm their medical correspondent, and we talk about various different healthcare topics that happen in the community. And the reason I did all these pictures are more for Jamin. He gets a kick out anytime I post something on here. He gets excited about that. And again, this is a way to engage your community in terms of what's going on in medical things that are going on. The reason this is important, a lot of times they call me about, this week it was Lamar Odom. You know, and they're talking about this is a basketball player who was doing cocaine and various different sexual enhancement medications, and he is in a coma and he's on dialysis and he's not doing well. So their story can be told in a number of different ways. So I took it as an opportunity to tell people what happens when you do cocaine and what happens in terms of the problems with some of these supplements. And we actually came up with some very good stories in terms of really breaking down what these medications do physiologically and what they could potentially do for our population. So again, an opportunity to educate and engage and inspire people to not do drugs. The other thing you can do is tell your own personal stories. You know, and that's an important thing. Addie and I's dog passed away. We brought a veterinary doctor in there and kind of talked about the story about how animals affect people, keep them healthier in the grieving process, and people responded to that. You can raise awareness. Through this process, we've done a lot with the Movember movement, with the things that Siju and Jamin are doing. We've done a lot to raise awareness for men's health in our communities that people weren't doing before. The Jaguars involved, the local media were involved. The Raise Awareness campaign with the Drive for Men's Health has been spectacular. What we did this year in Jacksonville compared to what we did before, we got the Jacksonville Suns, which are a local baseball team. We threw out the first pitch. We did a lot of things with the local media. Senator Marco Rubio wrote a note. They got a letter from the President of the United States. So we had a wonderful day. We had a wonderful trip. And I'll show this short video. I guess we don't have video for it?
Florida to Jacksonville, New York, and they're heading west to LA. And I am joined by one of the doctors who is taking this wheel, Dr. Colin Powell. Good evening. When's the last time you saw a doctor?
A little bit today. game once I try to do that.
Yes, it would. As a matter of fact, I want to see it out.
All right, thank you so much. They're here at the Sun Stadium throwing out the first pitch. For that, I'm downtown. Okay, so first base means NBC 12, ABC 25.
What's your name?
Nathan Waters.
Nathan Waters, thank you for joining us. I know it's hot here.
Yeah. Thanks for having us. I have a letter on behalf of Senator Marco Rubio I'd like to share. Dear friends, it is with great pleasure that I welcome you to the Personalized Urology and Robotics Second Tesla Drive for Men's Health event. This marathon drive will help increase awareness of men's health issues and encourage men to take their well-being a top priority. Last year's drive successfully reached over 350,000 men, and I'm hopeful this year will continue that record of success. The Drive for Men's Health initiative takes place during Men's Health Week and offers a valuable educational opportunity. In our society today, men's health issues are not discussed with the openness and regularity they deserve, and this drive plays a vital role in reversing that trend by offering unique lectures and activities during each stop of the drive. The health measures discussed, such as improving sleep, eliminating smoking, managing stress, making better food choices, and keeping active will foster healthier families and communities across the country. I would once again like to recognize Personalized Urology and Robotics for all of its efforts, and I look forward to hearing your clinic's successful advocacy efforts in the future. Sincerely, your Senator, Marco Rubio.
Thank you very much. We're part of Kirkland, which is part of South Lake Hospital, which is part of Insulated Orlando Health, and that's where we launched off from. But we're very excited to be here in the hometown of Dr. O'Brien, the urologist. So thank you very much. Men's Health is thank you for coming out. Thank you. Thank you very much for having us.
So you can see it allows a lot of impact. And you can see how much this really impacted a lot of people. More than 440 million people were reached for this. And again, if you wanted to pay for this type of impact, it'd be more than $740,000 you'd have to pay for this type of media attention. And with this, with social media and the various different things we did, we didn't have to really pay for any of that. I mean, there were some costs I'm sure CJ and Jamin incurred, but it's things that you can do that you can do. I throw the shaving bit in there. I forgot last night we were talking about favorite RAMSES moments. The first robotic shave off that we did last year it is right there. It allows you to impact and control the data that's out there. You can, I do a lot of advocacy now. This came straight out of the things from the radio that were picked up by the American College of Surgeons, the AUA, and things of that nature. And they actually use the radio show. We use that as a voice for things that are going on in terms of the political aspects and the changes that are going on in the United States. We have leaders in the American College of Surgeons and the AUA that come on the show, and we talk about factors and that makes a difference for our colleagues who are surgeons. It allows us to educate, it allows us to engage, and allows us to inspire not only our fellow surgeons and colleagues and physicians, but also our community. So it makes everyone smarter, hopefully. Social media and the internet. I think, some of the people that I've spoken to at this conference, it's an important thing. Unfortunately or fortunately, doctors are going to have to become more engaged in the internet and the social media aspect of things. It's very difficult. A friend of mine who's a TV anchor, she mentions that for someone to be viable on Twitter, which is, and I'll show you some numbers in a little bit, to be viable on Twitter, you have to personally send out about 20 to 25 tweets a day. That's physically impossible, in my opinion, if you're going to actually practice medicine. I wake up in the 6:30 in the morning. I get home these days between 7 to 9 o'clock at night. Once clinic starts, I start operating. I barely have time to eat or drink, let alone sit and tweet 50 times a day about various different things that are going to be useful or intelligible. So it's just important that kind of, if you're going to be on here, make impactful things that are going on, and there are ways to do it. And it's important to think about the numbers. This is the slide I used at this talk last year. Facebook had, at that time, 123 billion monthly active users. This year, this is from a few days ago, 149 billion monthly users. You can look at some other technologies. Instagram is one of the more highly growing mediums, 300 million users. If you look at other factors, Twitter, this is a slide from last year, over 550 million registered users and 215 monthly users. New data, 645 million registered users and more than 304 million monthly users. So people are using this stuff. And the thing that's important to know here, and this is why physicians need to keep an eye on this technology, 87% of American adults, for example, look online for health information. This was 80% last year. 41% of patients say that the social media content, so what's on Facebook and different places, affects their choice of provider or what they do for healthcare. That's interesting because for me, like when I'm doing a topic on TV or on my radio show, one of the first things I do is I Google it. Or even for me, like when I was preparing this talk, my computer stopped saving. So I was kind of freaking out that I'm going to get up here and everything's gone. So I Googled what to do and why it's doing that. There's no useful information. It's a bunch of chat rooms of people who have no idea what's going on, giving ridiculous suggestions. None of the medicine's becoming like that. Dr. Google has chat rooms of people passing on information that if you really pay attention to it, is one person passing on wrong information and a bunch of people agreeing. So when you go down a bunch of lines, it's incorrect information passing on that becomes profoundly dangerous. The other thing that you kind of think about as a surgeon, so for me as a prostatectomist, if you think about this, all it takes is one or two people who have a bad outcome with a prostatectomy. So if you think about 10 to 15% of people who have a prostatectomy are going to have leaking. And they go on there and they write on the chat room about the problems with leakage. And they write and people agree or whatnot. If someone who just had prostate cancer goes on and Googles prostatectomy, they're going to have a very bad impression of what's going on. So the important part of this thing is that if 40% of consumers are affected by what they're going to do with their health based on what's on the internet, as healthcare professionals, I think if we have an obligation to take control and create some of the educational content that's out there, we could maybe be a little bit more responsible for the accuracy of the content that's out there, and maybe that could outshine the misleading information that's out there if we are data-driven, smart, and engaging with our community. And you know, a lot of times if you look at a lot of the things, people trust what's out there and they trust what's being said by people who are non-physicians a lot more. So if we can engage people and be the trusting voice, what's going on, look at Sanjay Gupta. Everyone trusts what Sanjay Gupta says, and he's done that by giving people good information. And so if we can take on the responsible delivery of health information to our community, that's a good thing to do. The other thing to keep in mind, the hospitals are beginning to enter this idea. They see that 26%, only 26% or so of hospitals participate in these things, but that's going to grow. So keep that in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is doctors are starting to go to the internet for information. You know, this cartoon talks about this. Think how many times we Google things when we're trying to look up information. We have to make sure that we can trust that information. If you kind of look on Wikipedia and things like that, all of us can go sit and create a page about Wikipedia and put absolute garbage on there. No one really checks it. So if we as physicians and people of science can try to create good information out there, we can trust that we're giving good information to our colleagues. So I think that's one of the big things to keep in mind when we're talking about social media, the internet, and then medical media. If we want to educate, engage, and inspire our community, this is a good way to do it if we do it in an honest and true way, which I think as physician in our heart, that's one thing that we want to do. So that's, I hope, a little bit of a segue. I want to thank Addie here because whenever I go on trips, usually the stations ask me to do something, and she always becomes my producer, and she sadly figured out that middle picture is the first time that she figured out if we write things down and she puts it on her coat, it's a good way for me to read it. So that became something that we did in a bunch of places, and you can see, and with time, she's become less happy about that being the process through the times. And one of the stories at the end, when the first time she figured that out, was actually we did a story when I was in Interlaken about how the Swiss are probably some of the happiest people in the world. So the more we spend time in Switzerland, we find it such a beautiful, wonderful place. So thank you for inviting us to your town. And Guy Valencia is the picture on the left. That's my father, who I get to operate with every day, who gives me the chance to do this every day. So it's one of the greatest thrills in my life to be able to operate with him every day. So I always publicly thank him for giving me the opportunity. And if anyone wants to listen into our radio show, you can always tweet in, listen live either on that or on WOKV.com. So thank you for the opportunity. And again, thanks for the opportunity to be part of your family. Thanks.